Well, I take a look at the radar early in the week, and I see something that I haven't seen a whole lot of here in the last several weeks, and that's rain across a wide area of the U.S. Is it going to break a drought? What are we going to be seeing with this rainfall here to kick off the month of November? We're going to talk about that and more. Joining us for a look at this week's weather forecast, Eric Snodgrass with Nutrient Ag Solutions. Eric, thanks for being here and joining us again this week. And man, oh man, you get green on the radar. That's something we haven't seen a whole lot of here as of late.
Yeah, and it's been amazing just some of the messages that have been coming in. Like people, you would have thought they've been doing rain dances, right? They were just so excited to tell me that they got a couple of tenths of an inch, or some people got quite a bit more than that. I mean, you just look at the first system that came through, which of course kicked off a ton of severe weather over the weekend in parts of the southern plains. We had multiple reports of tornadoes, high winds, hail. And we have that risk again today, by the way, for the southern plains, kind of moving its way, toward the main corn belt here. But the reality is that I've got places that didn't measure rainfall in 8 weeks that just picked up 3, 4, 5 inches really, really quickly. And for many, I was talking to some guys yesterday. They're like, listen, we got everything harvested. We started doing some fall tillage. This rain is exactly on time for what I needed it to be. So I think you're getting a lot of folks that are certainly looking at, but now they're going, well, how much is coming? Like I noticed that parts of Oklahoma, but Kansas, Arkansas, Missouri are under flood watch already this morning. The backside of the system is quite cold. We still have two more systems that are going to follow it. They might be bringing snow into the western plains, believe it or not. I'm talking about Colorado, western Kansas, maybe western Nebraska. This just, it's like we flipped a switch and the pattern decided to go from coming out of the Northwest, which is bone dry in September and October, to coming out of the Southwest, which opens the Gulf and gets everything cranking. And boy, I mean, if we thought, I mean, Jesse, we talked like, hey, I think this might flip at the end of the month. I think it's going to change. We have all this evidence. MJO is moving. We were watching La Nina. We knew that historically during La Nina development time periods, that Octobers and Novembers rarely looked the same. They always flip flopped one way or the other. And here we go. It's now on.
Well, and thinking about this flip and looking through the rest of the month, I mean, how long does this active pattern last? And does it bust the drought, or does it at least help in some areas? I mean, how long are we looking at this pattern staying the way it's shifted, Eric?
Yeah, I would have told you last week, and I probably did, that this isn't a drought buster. And the reason for that is, if it took us 8 weeks to get into this drought, all of
Mhm.
September, all of October, one rain doesn't undo it, because you typically get a lot of runoff. You get some immediate evaporation. It tends to be windy around these systems. But my tune kind of changed over the weekend when I saw the upcoming forecast for at least the next 2 weeks. And already, according to some of NASA's measurements, we have recovered the 0 to 16 inch profile in some places, where they're now above the 50 to 70% mark, which they were in the 2 percentile range across the central United States. I mean, that's significant. And I think that it won't change the drought monitor in a huge way when it's released this Thursday. But I think we're going to start to see some amelioration to it and things starting to shift around a little bit. To be honest, it's amazing just to say that I'm actually quite worried about the flooding risk. And even
Mm.
though I would have thought that parts of the southeast would stay the driest with all of this, or maybe parts of the Gulf Coast would stay the driest, we've watched over the last few days, another system coming out of the Caribbean. It's called potential tropical cyclone 18. Should it strengthen, which we're forecasting, it'll come right over kind of the western side of Cuba and get into the Gulf of Mexico. Some models pulled that toward Florida as a weaker system, not a powerhouse, but brought its moisture toward Florida and Georgia, which has also been extremely dry. Georgia has since Milton came through, or not Milton, excuse me, since Helene came through, or it may go into Texas. I mean, we still just kind of don't see exactly where it's going to go yet. But yeah, this month of November is starting off with a whole new round of things to be looking at, a much more volatile temperature pattern going forward. And the key in all of this, Jesse, is that all of the coldest air is in the west. So if you can get cold air established in the west, colder than average, the jet has to dip around it. And that's what opens us all up. That's what I mean when I say southwest flow. It just dips in the west, runs right through the southern plains, straight toward the Great Lakes, and that's where all the action is that corridor.
Well, and thinking about this too, if that tropical system, say it got over to Texas and maybe worked its way up through, I'm just thinking out loud here, the lower Mississippi River, the levels, of course, are not great. So maybe getting a system like that could help us here as we get towards the tail end of our key export, kind of shipping season. But obviously, fertilizer application with fertilizer product coming north, I mean, we could use a little help for the lower Mississippi right now, too.
Yeah, the Mississippi right now is lower than all the time we had last fall. Okay, so you look, last October and November, it bounced around about 9 feet below low stage. At Memphis right now, it is 10.33 feet. But the rain that's coming through should really go a long way in kind of changing this. And, we're just going to have to keep a close eye on its potential impact in that river system. But I just look out over the next 7 days, and I've got rain on both sides of the river. So in Mississippi, in Tennessee, and in Kentucky, there's 1, 2, maybe 3 inches of rain. And then in Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, Iowa, I've got a lot of places picking up 1 to 2 inches. And then there's a stripe, I think, that's going to extend through parts like northwestern Arkansas into southeastern Missouri, almost straight up to Missouri, that the models have keyed in on that could get some really heavy rain. So that hits part of the Missouri Basin and part of the Mississippi, the Arkansas River. And yeah, we could really start to bring those levels back up in a hurry. I would just want to see them above low stage, because when you're above low stage, traffic moves on that river.
Good thoughts. Good thoughts. Let's talk South America. How are things looking there? I know that things have been pretty steady with wet season rains in Brazil as of late. Argentina's pattern's been a little more active. What are you watching in South America, Eric?
Yeah, so we got the new numbers from Mato Grosso on Friday. They are smack dab on their historical averages for getting planted by November the 1st. So that is about 80% done. A year ago, we were at 83%. 2 weeks ago when we talked, they were 35% off of last year's pace, and now they're just about 4% off. But we need to remember something about this. That planting pace for the last 2 weeks, when they basically put in about 60% of the crop, 60% of it went in a very short window, right? So it's not spread out, which means that crop will be going through different stages of vulnerability at the same time. And while right now we don't have any predictions of there being any sort of major problems, in fact, the forecast continues to look wet. For key regions in South America that need more rain. I'm talking like, gosh, you come in there from Mato Grosso over toward Goiás, Sao Paulo. It's still quite wet. They're a bit drier in southern Brazil. I wouldn't say that it's really dry, but a bit drier. I think the question will be, does La Nina do typical La Nina things for them, which would start to dry out the northeast corner and maybe parts of Argentina? That's about the only weather story that I'm able to pick up on right now, and that's not enough to make the markets bullish, right? I mean, it's just the reality is it's expected to rain in South America, and we just got to keep an eye on how much that rain is and if it matters overall to the remainder of their planting season, which is just about done.
Eric, good stuff as always. Anything final you were watching around the world here this week?
Yeah, a couple of things. I'm sure you heard last week about all the flooding that happened in Spain. That was a very hyper local area that the flooding occurred. But by some estimates near Valencia, there were almost up to, I think, 25, 27 inches of rain in a short amount of time. The rest of Europe was under a ridge and quite warm and quite dry. But I do think that as we go forward into this winter, monitoring the momentum in both the Pacific and Atlantic jet is going to be key in telling you if November is setting the stage for much of winter, in other words, active, miserable in some cases, or if this is just kind of a push now and things will back off later. I have yet to answer that question, but I do know that all the long range forecasts for the month of November that are released look quite wet in the middle part of the country, wet in the Northwest United States. The drier risks may be up the East Coast, but that's still not, there's the risk there. It's not a major thing. So that's where we stand. And I think it's going to be an interesting month, and hopefully one that starts to crack on this drought, because the thing I'm worried about is if we don't get rid of this drought in fall and lock some moisture into that soil now, what are we going to do come spring if that's when we have to overcome the drought? Because there is worry about 2025 drought simply because of La Nina and the deficit in soil moisture here at the end of this year.
We'll track it. We'll stay on top of it with you. Folks can also find more agweather.com, ag-wx.com. Eric Snodgrass, Always good to talk with you, my friend. Thanks for joining us this week.
Yeah, take care, Jesse.